There is a school of thought and trend amongst mountain bike manufacturers and journalists that the mix of 29-inch wheel up front and 27.5 on the rear, or MX, is the ultimate setup for an eMTB. But whilst that might well be true in a downhill scenario, what about uphill? Now, the argument goes is that a 29-inch wheel up front is the better choice simply because it'll roll through rock and root that much easier. Now, my mate Owen over on EMBN Tech talks about such things as the angle of impact and contact patch and hysteresis. Now, I don't think we need to go into that much detail, simply the fact that if 29-inch is the better option in a downhill scenario, then surely in a technical uphill situation, it makes even more sense. Now, you might have seen some of our exploits on EMBN in some pretty desolate, unforgiving places on many different bikes. We were in northern Italy recently with a DJI bike on some pretty harrowing limestone marble rock outcrop. We've been to North Wales, we've been to Scotland. You might have seen Chris Ackrig putting this very bike into some pretty crazy places. And throughout this video, we're going to talk about the impact of wheel size, and we will come to some conclusions because we think this applies not just to fire road climbing on an e-bike, but even more so in technical riding situations. But it's not just about the wheel size. I do need to cover off a few other things first that will have an impact in the climbing ability of your eMTB. Obviously, the main one is going to be your motor. But it's not just the motor brand, it's the personality of how the motor works, such things as the overrun, maybe the extended boost mode, which you've got on the Bosch Performance Line CX motor, and also things such as how you engage with the bike, having the right cadence to be able to get the most power out of that bike when you're climbing hills. Now, the next thing that's going to affect your climbing ability, along with your wheels, are the tyres which are shod to them. Now, tyres need to be informed for a number of reasons. You need to have a good stiff sidewall to enable you to run a low tyre pressure to get a good contact patch. Next up, you need to have a good aggressive tread pattern. And thirdly, I'm going to get my balls out for this, is the compound. Now, the thing with compound is you might well have a tyre which feels good in the dry, but when it rains and the temperature drops, there's lots of tyres out there that go from super grippy to absolutely zero grip at all. Now, let me just show you. These are some Schwalbe balls. So this is what happens with the tyre. As you can see, lots of deflection, and then a really soft compound tyre. As you can see, there's less deflection. So that's a really good example of what's happening with your bike as you're bouncing up or down a trail. Now, we will go on to prove that wheel size is actually super important when it comes to climbing an eMTB, but so too is the wheels that you choose. And for me, one of the key features you need on a wheel is fast engagement. Now, our partner brand Industry 9 happen to have some of the fastest engaging hubs in the business. This is the Grade 300 with the Hydra hub. But more than that, you need a wheel which is a good balance between stiffness and compliance to enable you to navigate your way through horrible rock gardens and stream sections. So this is a 32-spoke wheel with an aluminium rim, and like I said, it's got a really nice compliance to it. Oh, there is one other thing which is really important as well, is that if you're climbing horribly nasty limestone stream beds like we have been today, there is a danger if you're running, say, sub 20 PSI in your tyre, that you can get like a pinch flat in amongst the rocks. So the great thing about a wheel such as this, the Grade 300, it's got a wide hollow profile which reduces the risk of pinch flat punctures. So we're talking about design, durability, and of course that free hub engagement. So we set off up a stream bed. It's the kind of thing we do frequently on EMBN, whether it be near the beach, in the woods, or at many thousands of feet in remote mountains. After all, that's the essence of eMTB, right? Adventure, the unknown, physical exhaustion. Now, before we go into the comparisons of the white E160 and the Canyon Strive, I just want to say a big thanks to Christine out in British Columbia, because I was pondering this wheel size climbing discussion, and I woke up the next morning and Christine had sent me a message, said that she prefers climbing with the Levo 2929 rather than the MX setup. So I think there's definitely something in this whole business of wheel size when it comes to technical climbing. Right, the two bikes then, I think they're perfect comparisons because both bikes have got the Bosch Performance Line CX motor, exactly the same motor. But there are certain differences between the two bikes, even though they're actually really close in things such as the suspension travel. This bike, the E160, is 155 rear, 160mm up front, whereas the Canyon Strive, the World Cup winning bike with Fabien Barel, although a different model, is 160, 170mm travel. The reach sizes, the white is 483 in size large, whereas the Strive is 500mm in size large. So the Strive is a little bit longer. It's longer in the reach and it's also a little bit longer in the wheelbase. The seat-tube angle does, on paper, tend to favour the Strive because it's a little bit steeper, 77 degrees compared to the 75 degrees on the white. The weight on the two bikes, the white is 26.5 kilos and the Strive is 24.5 kilos. So again, all roads kind of lead to the Canyon having the advantage. But like I said, there is a difference, and this bike has got 29/27 wheels on it, and the white is 29/29. In terms of the price of the two bikes, they're pretty much similar, around about £6,000. But guys, what about out on the trail? Now, the difference between 29 and 27.5 isn't going to be massive on fire roads, but in this steppy, knotty, horrible ground, the difference between grip and momentum is pretty big. Now, what is it they say about MX wheel size? Business up front and party on the back. The thing is, when you're climbing technical terrain, you need poise and you need momentum. So a bike where there's lots going on and there's lots of weight transfer is actually not quite as good as a bike with 29/29. I mean, who am I to challenge the bike which won the E-Enduro World Cup Series? But I personally think that's a better setup. It's really important to understand we're not saying one bike is better than the other here. This is just about wheels, an exploratory journey into wheel size in ways some people might not be considering. And part of that reason is that many people don't really want to spend their free time wrestling their eMTB's upstream beds. They want to be shredding their bikes down them, in which case the MX setup on the Canyon might well be the better setup. Right, what's the bottom line then, guys? Well, I think, obviously, an e-mountain bike is for riding uphill and downhill and along on the single track. What's the best? Now, if you'd asked me what's the best in a downhill scenario, then I do believe that it probably is weighted a little bit more towards the MX setup. The reason for that are certain things such as your ability to get your weight over the back of the bike in ever steepening terrain. You've got the whole business of weight distribution on your bike as the trail gets steeper. And you could argue that a bike with an MX setup is a little bit more fun and a little bit more maneuverable, possibly in some of the tighter corners. I don't actually believe that it's faster in tighter corners, but that's a whole new subject. When it comes to climbing, I definitely felt that I had more stability, a better weight distribution on that bike, given that the bikes are quite similar in geometry in terms of the chainstay 445, 446. And I think on this bike, I did tend to find that I was moving my weight back and forward on the bike a little bit more, which actually kind of upsets the kind of rhythm and the flow of your ability to climb up a trail. So I definitely feel that 29/29 has an advantage in technical climbing situations. So this actually gives us a bit of a puzzle, which is the best size to choose overall on an e-mountain bike. I think you've obviously got to bring grip into the equation because a 29-inch wheel might give you better grip, obviously all things being equal. So I think it's a really, really interesting story. And as I said earlier, I think the mountain bike brands and lots of journalists do tend to favour the MX setup. But if you get an e-mountain bike into the kind of situations that it's designed for, with these amazing motors and batteries that give us ever more range, I think there's definitely room to make more bikes like the white E160. Let us know your thoughts, guys. Do you love riding technical climbing? Because I think we're only still at the beginning of the whole sport of uphill flow. Thanks for joining us from Finale.